Hi folks, this is Donald. In this video I'm going to be offering you a little treat because I'm going to be showing you a full real-time urban sketch of this quirky little fisherman's cottage in Cornwall, England. And I'm going to be showing you the whole sketch in real time so you can sketch along with me if you'd like to. I don't use any complicated jargon or rules. I try to make things as simple as I possibly can. So this shouldn't be too difficult even if you're a relative beginner. And this is the sketchbook I'm drawing on today. I will talk about the materials more as we go on, but this is a square look-turn sketchbook. Then there is a putty eraser, you'll need a pencil, a pen to draw with. I'm using a fountain pen filled with ink, and then some brush pens I'll be using later on to do a bit of colouring in. And I'll also talk about some alternatives if you don't have brush pens or don't want to use those. So for now I'm going to sweep away all of these things and get started on the sketch. I start off with a very simple pencil sketch, and I'm using a totally bog standard pencil for this. I usually use a mechanical pencil, but to make things clearer on the page for you to see, I decided to just use a normal pencil that I found kicking about. So what you're going to see is I've put up on the screen, marked on the photo, where the lines are going to be that I'm marking. So you can see I'm not following any perspective rules or anything like that. I'm just drawing what I can see. So the bottom line goes slightly up the way, and then the right side of the building is straight up. So we quickly fire that in. Then we go across to the middle part of the building, another vertical line. That one is taller than the one on the right hand side. So very quick scribble again, and then just a line across, angled up the way that will join those two. See, nice and simple. Now we have to tackle the left side of the building, so it's on the bottom, you've got an angled up line, and then another vertical line that will stop slightly short. I drew that one slightly too tall, so make it slightly shorter on your version. And then the roof slant, and the bit at the top to join it. Now I realised at this point that I'd made that side of the building slightly narrow, so I'll go back and fix it, and that's why we do this in pencil, so we can go back and fix things before we jump into the pen. Then the chimney pot, just a few quick scribbles again, and it doesn't look especially right at this stage. It doesn't matter too much, it's just a case of marking where things will go roughly, and we can figure it all out properly during the pen sketch. So now a couple more angled lines, just following what I can see. And then the chimney pot on the right hand side. If you're new to drawing buildings, you might find this a little daunting, but actually if you break it down, it's really quite straightforward. In a matter of a minute or two, you've managed to pencil sketch the outline of a house without remotely thinking about perspective or any composition rules or anything. We're just here doing a wonky, wobbly sketch and having fun drawing, and we're not going to care how it turns out at the end. However it turns out will be perfect because it will be our vision and our hand that's come up with it. So I'm just going to make this side of the building a little wider. Just thought it was a wee bit narrow, so then we can just join up and correct the lines that we'd put in the wrong place. And that looks about right, so I'm just going to rub out the extra line that I'd added incorrectly. That'll just avoid any confusion. And I'm using a putty eraser from Faber-Castell. There are lots of brands that make putty erasers. The reason I like using these ones is that apart from being squishy and like a mini stress ball, they are also good for erasing, helpfully enough, because they don't damage the page, unlike a typical eraser. A few other things I want to draw in before I go on to the pen stage. Just quick scribble of the two windows on the left side of the door, then the door itself, then the window on the right. And then we've got three windows along the top that you can quickly scribble in. No need for accuracy at this stage, just fire them in. And you will see when we get to the ink stage that I do not keep the lines straight. They are all wibbly wobbly and wonky, completely freehand, and whatever instinctively comes out, that's the way I draw. So just a very quick scribble to mark in where the foreground items will go, and I think I'm pretty happy with that. I'll just do an extra few scribbles to give you a chance to catch up if you are trying to draw this at home. I know it's harder to follow someone than it would be to just sit if you were sketching yourself, so hopefully this will give you enough time, and of course you can rewind the tape if you need to, if you think this is all going too fast. Moving on to the pen, and I'm using a fountain pen, and this is the first time I've ever used a fountain pen to draw a sketch, so this is going to be intriguing. I have filled the pen with Diatramentis document ink, which is a handmade ink. It is waterproof and it is permanent. It's also for fountain pens, and you can use it with watercolour, which is ideal. So after a lot of research, this is the one I plumped for. And I'm going to start by drawing in the foreground items. Now the reason I start with that is because if I draw the house first and then put in the foreground items, you're going to have lines crossing over each other, and I don't want that. So it's a strange thing you have to get used to if you want to draw in this way, is that you have to draw the most incidental things first. So we're drawing in some grass to start with, and then I will start drawing in the baskets and pots, and then there's some fishing buoys that you would have out at sea, and then there's all sorts of clutter and jumble, and that's the sort of stuff that I really like drawing. I love drawing jumble. And as I mentioned, I'm using a Look Term 1917 sketchbook, which I haven't really talked about much. I've been using this recently. It's a nice sketchbook. It's a square one, but you can use a portrait or landscape sketchbook just the same. This is really just a sketchbook for drawing on. It wouldn't take watercolour. The paper is too thin, but it is nice and smooth and it feels of good quality. So far, out of the few sketches I've done on it, I've enjoyed using this one. And I like the square format as well. It's quite unusual and it makes you think a little differently about the way you construct your sketch. So there's a wicker basket type thing that's got some kind of plant coming out of it. So I've drawn that first behind the little tuft of grass that I've drawn. And then we'll move on to drawing some of the buoys that go behind that. And there's really quite a straightforward process I go through for this. It's just a case of foreground and then what's behind that, and then what's behind that. You can take as much time as you'd like. There's no rush, no judgment. If you are quicker or slower than someone else, it really doesn't matter. Now there's a pot in front of that second buoy that I'd drawn in, so I needed to get the pot in first before I complete that second buoy. And then there's another pot. And you can see my sketching style is very cartoony. It's just a case of some squiggly lines to show that there's plants and bushes and when I do the big bush area on the left side of the house, it's just curly lines, exactly the same. It's a bit like how you would draw clouds when you're a child, and I still feel a lot like a child when I'm drawing these days. So I'm not going to try and draw every single plant pot and plant, because that would take absolutely forever. It's really just enough to fill the front of the house and give the suggestion that there are plants and plant pots and all sorts of clutter. And it really doesn't matter if they look straight, they can be falling over. That all adds to the character and the wobbliness of the sketch, especially once you see the wobbliness of the building that I'll be drawing afterwards. If you get into the way of sketching like this, it's great fun because you can just let loose and not have to give any thoughts as to accuracy. It's just about having fun and doodling away. So we've reached the doorway now, so I'm going to go jump across to the other side of the doorway and do the pots on the right side of the door. And I just do that, rather than go straight into drawing the door, I just make sure that I'm doing all the foreground items now, in case anything is cutting across the door. Now what you might not be able to see terribly well is that there's a big-ish plant pot and it's got a stand thing on it that presumably plants would grow up the side of. So I'm drawing that in at the moment, just the right side of the door. There are 3 stands on it, and then it's got some plant type things in the base of it. And I love drawing like this. It's just great fun to get lost in all the details. Now to the right of the house there is a bench, so I'm drawing in that now. Start with a bar on the left hand side and then some horizontal bars going across, and then we will join those up. And you can see I don't draw quickly, I do take my time. I'm constantly looking and analysing the picture to see what it is I'm looking at, and I think most of the time when you're making mistakes, it comes from just not observing correctly what it is you're seeing. And I do that all the time. I make loads of mistakes, and it's almost always because I wasn't looking at it properly, I wasn't paying attention. A lot of the time your mind assumes something is there, and then you draw it and then you look up and then you realise you've done it wrongly. But if you just study what's there, then you should come up with something approximately true to the scene, but in a wobbly way. And if you make a mistake, don't worry about it, just keep going. We're not worried about mistakes when we're sketching in this way. It's just very free and sketching for happiness, not for accuracy. So I'll just stop for a moment, allow you to catch up again if you are joining in. So far I'm liking this pen very much. It's a nice thin line, the ink is flowing smoothly and there's no real scratchiness on the pen. And I actually didn't buy this pen, I found it. It was in a pen pot in my home and I had to ask around whose it actually was because it wasn't mine. And it turns out it was my sister's and she had bought it years ago. So it's a Pilot Metropolitan pen. It costs about £20. I think I had to look it up to find out what it was and do a bit of research. Fortunately it was in a distinctive design, so I was able to find it. So it's just a cheap fountain pen, but I'm liking it. I was getting a bit tired of fine liner pens because the tips wear out so quickly, so I started researching fountain pens, and then before I bought one I found one for free, so all I had to do was buy the ink, and I'm an instant convert to fountain pen drawing. It's really nice. You can hold it at a much more comfortable angle than a fine liner, for me at least, and the line is narrower than the sorts of lines that I would normally draw, and it very much fits the wonky way that I hold my pen, as I've talked about previously. So if you've never tried drawing with a fountain pen, I would recommend it. Get a cheap one even and give it a go. It's absolutely ideal for this kind of wobbly sketching. Now I've just drawn the right side guttering going down the side of the building, and then just before that I had drawn one of the plant pot holders that was sticking out the side. So again, just making sure that I drew that first. I was looking at the picture and saw that that was cutting across the edge of the building, so I had to make sure to draw that first so that there wasn't going to be a line cutting through it when I draw the guttering after it. So we can then move across to the left side, and I'm going to draw the gutter going across the top of the building. And you can see this line is completely wobbly, and that is my approach for the entire building. It's a free, loose, wobbly line. This sketch goes absolutely nowhere near a ruler or measurements or trying to be accurate. It's just wobbles and wobbles everywhere. There was a wooden plank underneath the guttering, which I drew in, but I didn't really think it added much. So you can just skip this bit. I think it looked a bit not quite right. And yes, the line was extremely wobbly there. But you can just leave that bit out. I did sort of fix it later on, and that's what I'm talking about mistakes. If you do draw something and you think, oh no, that doesn't look right at all, don't prejudge it, just keep going. There's usually a way to fix things and hide mistakes. Drawn the vertical line for the central part of the building. I decided to go back in and add some lines diagonally across that wooden plank to try and make it look like it was 3D, but then that didn't really add anything either. So again, I would just ignore this part. So onto the doorway now, and I've drawn it very wonky, this one, and then as I'm looking at it there's an insert, but I'm going to draw in a plant pot in front of the side of the door because you can't actually see the base of the doorway because of the plant pot, so I want to get that in. And then the door is not flush to the wall, it is inset, so they want to add that insert in first. And then you can add in, there's a window above the door and then there's the door itself. And maybe you drew that window a little bit too big, but that's fine. And then there's another window in the door, and then I'll just draw a little door handle. And you'll see the proportions are all wrong. If you see the height of the door compared to the size of the windows, later on it's not remotely correct, but that's fine. It adds to the bizarre character of the picture. So throw in the windows now, and these are totally random wobbly lines going in all sorts of directions, not remotely interested in perspective here. I'm deliberately making these go all over the place, and I think I've mentioned in the past, the way I like to think about things like this is, you know, if you're using a mobile phone and you hold down your finger on the icon, certainly on an iPhone, and all the icons start to wriggle about, that's what I like to think that my sketches are like, that you've pressed your finger on the page and the whole page has started to wriggle about. And it does look a bit odd at the moment, but I think the final effect is quite effective. Now onto the chimney pots. Now I do like to exaggerate these as well, so I'm making these extra large. Think if these were the actual size chimney stacks, they would be making the house collapse. And huge oversized chimney pots. And then a couple of curled lines just to make them look rounded. So same thing on the left hand side. And you can see I'm not exactly following where the pencil marks are. The pencil was just to give me an approximate guide of where things will go, and then you're completely free to change it and do whatever you like when it comes to the drawing stage once the pencil marks are all rubbed out. I love that part. It's just like magic when you see the ink lines that have appeared out of nowhere. And then a lovely wobbly line across the top of the roof. Now for the side of the roof I'm going to do some curly bits rather than straight down, because I can see that there are some curly details because of the roof tiles. And then I'm trying to think, do I do the same on the other side or do I try and keep it flat? Sometimes I do have to just stop and think about what I'm doing. It's part of the reason it takes me so long to sketch, is I spend half the time just sitting thinking what I'm going to do next. But I decided I would do some squiggles on the right side as well. a wobbly line down the right hand side, but I haven't gone all the way down because I want to leave some room for the bushes. So if you are drawing along, hopefully you're managing to keep up and are not getting lost in my bizarre method. We can now draw all the cluttering pots along the left side. So there's mostly just bushes, but I want to draw in. There's a few pots that are kind of hidden almost within the bushes. So I'm going to draw those first and then I'll draw the bush behind. I just really love drawing clutter. It adds so much character to the cartoony style that I'm drawing in. And then there's 2 or 3 lower pots, like quite shallow ones. So I'm drawing those in. It adds lots of variation rather than just drawing them all the same size. The other advantage of using a fountain pen for the purposes of filming for YouTube is that I can hold my pen in a more natural way further away from the end of the pen, which has the advantage of that you can see more of what I'm drawing, because when I had to use a fine liner I was having to hold it much closer to the end of the pen and more upright, so it was harder for people to see, I think, what I was drawing at times. So hopefully it's much clearer what it is I'm actually drawing now. There's some buoys hanging up on the wall, connected with a string, so I'm going to draw those in. And then just a quick curled line to make it look rounded. And then we'll fire in the completely random lines of the bushes. And this is the cloud technique again, just squiggle lines and then a few M shapes for the effect of the bush. So we're getting there, it's starting to look like a house. Still a fair bit to do, but so far so good. Now there is also a table just hiding in behind the bush, so I'm drawing that in next. And again, if you are drawing along with me, if you do get lost or make a mistake and need to see what I've done, then just rewind and try it again. So once again, I'm just stopping, analysing, deciding what I'm going to do next. After much deliberation, I decided on the windows, so I'm going to do the inserts of the windows. That makes them look more three-dimensional. So it's a quick diagonal line in the top corner, then horizontal line across the top and vertical line down the bottom, and it just follows the same route that the outside edge of the window is taken, and just doing that for every single one of them. Now again, I'm not fussed about perspective. Typically if you're looking up the way at windows, these edges will be in the top right corner, and then if you're looking down the way, they'll be in the bottom right corner. So arguably you could have done the bottom windows, the corners could have been in the bottom rather than top, but I went with top. And then there's some window ledges to draw in. So it's 2 diagonal lines coming out, a line to join it, and then basically the same underneath to create the 3D ledge. And the ledges follow the same shape again, so that it's all consistent in its wobbliness. And I think if you were trying to do an architectural type sketch that was all perfectly measured and you were using a ruler and then one window was randomly wobbly, it would look a bit strange. But when you do it all like this, it kind of works for some reason. At least it does for me. I didn't quite get the ledges right in the top half of the building because you're underneath them, you're looking up at the ledges, so it's different to the ones below, but you can see the top of the ledge. So this took a little bit of figuring out, what am I looking at here? How am I drawing this? I think it took until about the third one before I quite got how I'm supposed to be drawing this. So I did the ledge slightly to the right of the window. Then there's a little box to the left of that, and then when you join it up it does slightly look like a window ledge. Not exactly, but it's close enough. Alright, so over on the left side of the building you can just see the edge, and there is a door on that left side of the building. So I'm just going to sneak in the edge of that. And now we can start to pack in the details. We'll start with the bricks on the chimney stack. So just follow the same route that you've had in what you drew before, so lines diagonally going up and then vertical lines to create the bricks. And same on this side, just keeping them all vertical. And there we have bricks. Exactly the same on the other one. I'm really surprised how well this ink is coming out on a fountain pen. The only time I've used a fountain pen before was when I was very young at school, and I remember having one that was very scratchy and it kept getting clogged, and this one's nothing like that at all. It's very smooth, finding it great to draw with so far. So now on to the roof tiles, and I decided to use a curly roof tile design for this one. So going along drawing every single tile individually. Unlike the bricks, I don't draw it just as lines and then dashes. I like to draw each one individually. And then the next row is placed just slightly to the side so that each line is landing in the middle of the tile above, because that's the way roofers put tiles on their roofs. I think this bit's quite fun because you're not really having to think too much. This is just repetitive and you can switch off and just enjoy this bit. In saying that, as you get about halfway through, your hand does start to wither slightly and your tiles start to get a little bit more random, a little bit more wobbly and misshapen. It all adds to the character much more than if they were all perfectly identical. I did actually want to be an architect when I was a kid. That was one of the first jobs I thought about doing. It's probably just as well that I didn't go down that career path. There would have been some fairly misshapen buildings in the world if I had gone down that route. The thing I'm wondering about fountain pens is if this pen writes so smoothly and is so good and it costs like £20, then why are there fountain pens that cost hundreds or thousands even? How much better can it be? Well, I know that's completely naive for someone who's never actually used an expensive fountain pen. I'm sure they're a delight to use, but this one's great. And I specifically chose the Diatramentis ink to go inside it because it is fully waterproof apparently and doesn't clog up pens, because I know a lot of waterproof ink can clog up fountain pens, but apparently this one doesn't. So let's draw in the window panes now. I miscalculated how many windows there are because when I started drawing and I hadn't actually noticed that the windows are open. So they're open at the top. So there are actually 4 window panes, but I thought there were 6. Again, most of the time mistakes come from not looking properly at what you're drawing. But 6 panes is fine. Makes very little difference. I'll draw 4 in the bottom half. The other good thing about this ink is that it is vegan. I actually emailed the company, Diatramentis, to ask. I couldn't see online any information on whether it was vegan or not, and I got a very nice email back from them saying that yes, it is indeed vegan, and then they wished me health and happiness, which I thought was a lovely thing to say in an email about ink. So just as same as I did with the edges of the window outline, now I'm going into the inserts of the window panes themselves to make them look 3D. I did do the glass panes, the angles in the bottom right corner rather than the top right, which I did for the outside of the windows, and that is not correct at all, but I don't care. Only a perfectionist is going to notice that, and that's not what I'm after anyway. And I think there must be a rebellious side to my nature that I always want to do things in the wrong way. If there are rules, then I tend to ignore them. I used to be really into photography, and I took that to quite a high level, winning some national awards and so on, and it all came from the fact that I was completely ignoring all the rules that you're supposed to follow. And eventually people started noticing it, and I was winning awards. So just follow your own path. I don't worry about what the rules are. I'm just doing my own thing. Right, so now I'm going to go and start on some of the brickwork. I decided not to draw every brick. I'm just going to dot about a selection along the edges of the building, and then a few more in the central part, but not too many. I just wanted to give the suggestion of bricks without having to pack it in with hundreds of them, because that's often what I do and it takes forever and I get carried away. So a few bricks dotted about is absolutely fine. It gives you the idea of brickwork, and these ones are very craggy and not straight at all. They're not like bricks like you see on the chimney pots above. These ones are very rough, solid stone construction, so you want to just make sure that they are all scraggly and wobbly. So now just dot a few at random. I was looking back at some of my early sketches, and I could see as my sketching had developed that I was getting a bit too carried away with detail, so I decided to go back to this. This is the way I was drawing when I started. This style was just dotting bricks randomly about rather than trying to draw every single brick on an entire location. So I've tried to go back to this again. It's quicker and it's just as effective, if not more so. Now on the right hand side the angle changes slightly because this is past the corner of the brick, so this is the other side of the brick that I've drawn on the left, alternating long and short length bricks. And it's just to give the idea that the bricks are around the corner of the building, that it's all one brick. And I don't think I quite got it exactly right, but it's close enough. are a few more bricks dotted about, and I think it's once you're adding in all this detail, it's really when the sketch comes to life and you're past the point of wondering whether this is actually going to work. You can just relax into it and think, yeah, this is turning out okay. So I'm just looking again to see, is there anything I've missed? And there is a straight line under the edge of the roof line, so I'm going to do that, and that will emphasise the curly edge of the tiles. And then I can see that there are some bricks that I can put in on the left side of the building that will give the idea that the bricks go around the corner again, just like they are on the right. So stopping just when you reach the table. And then I just decided to add in a few random large stones on the ground. These can be of any shape and size, just dotted about. And then I'm just drawing in the little patch of grass that is in front of all the pots and clutter, and a few squiggles for grass. And I throw in a few flowers as well. So I think we're almost about done with the drawing part. Just a few more grassy squiggles. And I think I'm quite happy with that. I'm just going to put in some curly lines on the guttering. That's just to make it look rounded rather than completely flat. And the same down the way in a smiley face curl. You always think you're finished, and then you notice there's more details to pack in. So it's these plant pot holders, the metal plant pot holders that go along. They don't have any plants on them, but they are on the building, so I want to draw them in. And then I noticed there was another one on the left side of the building as well. And this one does have a plant hanging from it, so I added that. And then I noticed there's some more clutter. There's some collection of pot type things coming up from behind the bush, so I added a few of those. And then there's another hanging basket holder behind it. And then endlessly more details, adding more objects behind, trying to make the scene as cluttered as possible. A little bit of grain on the wood of the table. And then I'm looking again, does anything else need altered or added? So I thought the hanging basket holders were looking a little flat, so I wanted to make those a little more three-dimensional. So I did a circle at the end of them, and then a simple line underneath and down the way. Just makes them look more 3D. And I'm really just fiddling at this stage. I could have just stopped, but I love to fiddle with my sketches, adding more and more detail. Alright, I think we'll call it done with the ink drawing stage, and now we can get rid of the pencil marks and move on to the fun part, the colouring in. Now I drew the pencil lines thicker than I would normally, just so you could see them better, which means a bit more scrubbing with the eraser, but the great thing about these putty erasers compared to a normal white eraser is that they don't damage the paper. This is a great little invention, this type of eraser, and I would hardly recommend it. They only cost a couple of pounds, they're very cheap, well worth the tiny investment. And this is like the magical part when you get rid of all the pencil lines and you're just left with the ink drawing that seems to have appeared out of nowhere. Every single time I do a sketch, I find this bit so enjoyable. It's a real surprise. Because when you've got the pencil marks all over the place, it still looks a bit messy and scruffy. And then when you take them away, it's just, you're left with the white page and the stark black ink marks. I love this part. And it always surprises me when I manage to do a sketch. I don't think I'll ever get over that because I'm not a trained artist. I haven't spent my life drawing. Even the fact that I'm doing art at all is a surprise to me. And now I can't really think of a time in the future when I won't be sketching and drawing. It really has been one of the best discoveries. Okay, so that's done. We can now go on to the colouring in. So I'm using Faber-Castell Pit Artist brush pens. They are filled with India ink, they are permanent and they are light fast. And as far as I'm aware, in terms of marker pens, they are the only light fast markers. So things like Copics are not light fast, Tombows not light fast. So if you put them out in the light, they are going to fade away very quickly, whereas these ones are India ink, which is permanent, and they're not going to fade. So you could put these on the wall if you wanted to, and they will stay exactly how you've drawn them. I'm using cadmium yellow, and I'm going around turning all the lights on. And this is a slight tweak from the way I've always done things up till now, is that I've usually turned the lights off and then had one light turned on in a window. Whereas now I've decided that I'm going to turn all the lights on in the buildings that I draw because it looks brighter and more cheerful. Yellow is a much more cheerful colour than black or dark grey, and I think it lightens the picture, and I just really like the look of that, of having all the lights on. It really brings it to life. So that's something I'm going to continue doing in future. If you don't want to use these marker pens, or you don't have these, as I mentioned, you can use Copics or Tombows. You can also use colouring pencils, watercolour. You wouldn't be able to use watercolour on this sketchbook because it's too thin and it's not treated for watercolour paint, but if you're using a watercolour sketchbook, then of course you could do this with watercolour. I just find this is more neat and precise, and that's just the way that I prefer to work. So I'm going on with the grey brush pens now. These are the cold grey range, and these are the soft brushes. So the previous set that I was using is a firmer tipped brush, and then you get the cold grey set comes in soft brushes as well, which are much nicer for covering larger areas because it's such a soft tip. It's more like a little paintbrush. And what I'm doing is going around the entire sketch now, filling in every area that I think needs to be grey. So I'm going to leave the building white, but I will put in the bricks in grey, and then all of the objects in the foreground will be grey because they are solid objects, and I want them to stand out and come forward from the house that will stay white in the background. And the technique that you want to use for this is just a brushing motion, like a sweeping motion. They dry quite quickly, but the smoother the paper you have, the less streaky these will be and the easier it is to work with. I often use Bristol board paper, which is very smooth and handles these pens brilliantly. So that would be another recommendation, but you could use hot press watercolour paper. Just any kind of paper that is smooth is ideal for this kind of pen, but they do work on cold press paper as well. I've tried that and it's fine. So if you're already through this sketch and you're saying, well, now he tells me, you can use this on cold press paper. It'll be fine, it just will be slightly more absorbent because it's a watercolour paper. And the idea is that I will lay down a layer of the cold grey one, and then you can layer these pens up. The India ink layers very well, so you can put different shades over the top of each other and then vary the contrast to suit your own needs. So I start with the lightest shade, and then I will go over it, some of the objects again in the next shade up to make it darker. I really do like black and white imagery. I know I've got the yellow in the windows, but the rest of the picture is black and white or grey and white. And that's something I've always liked in the photography that I used to do. It was black and white pictures that I did primarily, and I just like the look of it. I think even when I was doing the photography, I was always looking for things to look slightly unnatural and trying to find a more creative way to tell the story of a scene that I'm drawing, or in that case, photographing. And you can see things like the hanging basket holders, once they've got a bit of grey on them, they really come forward and stand out on the building. It starts to look a bit more real, like they are actually physical 3D objects rather than just flat 2D lines. And then all the bricks on the building will be coloured in grey, but as I said, the rest of the building will stay white. And don't worry if this looks completely different to yours. This does take practice, and you can always have more than one go at a sketch. It's not like you have to get it right first time. One of the things that I did when I was teaching myself how to sketch was that I picked a scene and I just drew it over and over again, as you might have seen in a previous video when I was showing you some of my early sketches. And I did a cinema scene that I drew repeatedly, and that's something you could do here. You could draw the same house over and over again if you wanted to, and you'll pick up little bits and pieces that you'll learn each time, and then you can apply that to the next one that you do. So do feel free to repeat it. Just embrace the mistakes that you make, and The more you practice, the better you'll get at this. I'm certainly a long way from being at the level of creating perfect sketches. I don't think I've ever created a perfect sketch, and I don't imagine I ever will, because your hand is always going to make errors and your mind will always switch off for a minute and draw the wrong thing or draw something in the wrong way. But that's totally fine. That's part of the experience of sketching. It doesn't have to be perfect. The window ledges now, so I'm covering those entirely in grey, and then I will go around the outsides of those ledges with the darker grey, and again that will emphasise the 3D shape of those. And then around the outsides of the window edges that are going in the way, that creates the depth, and it also emphasises the yellow. It adds more contrast and brightens the yellow. When yellow's against a grey, it always brightens it. I've just turned this around to do that section up the way because I find it easier with these pens to stroke it over smaller areas. If you tried to go over large areas, that's when you're more likely to get streakiness. And I think pens like Copics are supposed to be much less streaky, but I suppose that's the trade-off you get with India ink, is that it does dry very quickly, so you need to move quick, keep the ink moving, and that's how you get a nice smooth result. And it does work best over smaller areas. If I tried to colour in the main part of the building in grey, it would dry too quickly and you'd have streaks all over it. So it's about learning how to use these pens properly, what are their pros, what are their cons, and then working with that to get the result that you want. They only come with the soft brush tips in the grey colours, so if you want to use the brightly coloured ones, then they are the firmer tipped ones, and that's going to be even more streaky because it doesn't have the smooth brush tip that you can sweep along the page. But I do like the coloured ones because they are very, very vibrant. I'm just looking now to see if there's anything else I've left ungrayed, and apart from the rooftop, I think I'm pretty much well on with it now. See, it doesn't take long for the colour shading stage to come together. It's much quicker than the drawing stage. With the brickwork, I'm just randomly dotting about shades of grey and white. Leave some of them white and then add grey to some of them. It doesn't matter where you put the grey. The only part that matters is when the corner ones are, you want it to be the same on the left as the right of the corners because it has to look like the same brick. But otherwise you can just blot grey in any random brick you like. And that's not exactly how the bricks look in real life, it's just the way I always do them. There's consistency to all of my sketches because I do that, and that's something, if you want to find an identifiable style as a sketcher, then doing the same thing consistently is one of the ways you can get there. just draw a little shadow line under the curves. I don't tend to do much in the way of shadows. I don't do cast shadows on the ground. This is much more sketchy than that. I'm not looking for realistic light. I don't tend to pay much attention to what direction light is coming in. It's more about just making things look three-dimensional. That's all I'm concerned about. And then same as the brickwork, I'm going to just randomly dot blobs of grey in tiles, leave some of them white, put some of them grey, and then I will go in again with the darker shade, dotting that about, and it gives a nice fun dotty effect. And it's not like I knew how to do this instinctively when I started sketching. It took a lot of practice, trial and error to figure out a way that would look distinctive to me and something that I could repeat regardless of what it was I was drawing. And eventually I figured this out when I tried these pens and then tried them in this way of drawing. This is when I started to think, oh yeah, this could be my way. And so I've continued ever since. And because it's the lightest grey, there is a quite subtle difference between the grey and the white tiles, but once you add in the darker one, it really does show up the contrast level of the three different shades. And just some last looking around to see if there's anything else I've missed, and there doesn't appear to be. I've coloured in grey all the bits that I wanted to. So I can now move on to the second shade, and of the 4 pens I actually only used 2 for this sketch, the cold grey 1 and then this one which is the cold grey 3. Now I realise I'd missed some of the window edges, so back in with the cold grey 1 first. Sorry to confuse you. It's so easy to do that. You think you're done and then you realise you've missed something. And perhaps this is not strictly necessary, but I always like to layer up the ink just so you get a consistent result right across the picture. Okay, so now we can go in with the cold grey 3 at last, and I'm going to use this to darken up the objects in the foreground first, because dark objects always come forward and it adds depth to the scene. So all of the objects in the foreground are going to be grey. And one of the big things that I like about sketching in grey and white rather than lots of colours is it doesn't leave you with the dilemma of what colour to use, and then there's no issue about picking the wrong colour. It's all about thinking in tones, and that does to an extent simplify, because all you need to work out is where am I going to put the greys to make this object come forward. And see how much that chair just comes forward from the house once you've put in the darker grey. It's all about the contrast. there's that woven basket. And then the boys that are behind the pots that are light grey, I'm just going to leave those as they are. I could have done those darker grey as well, and that would brought them forward, but I decided to just leave them because I tend to find that it works better just to do one layer of the darker greys in front and then anything else behind is lighter. You can see the sweep of the grey pots around really is quite effective. Now the boys on the wall, I made them grey so they come forward from the brickwork behind. And then there's that plant stand just to the right of the door. And these brushes have a very nice narrow tip, so it's great for narrow objects like this. You can just smoothly sweep them round and they don't splodge outside the lines. I was one of those kids who always needed to be colouring inside the lines. I was not happy if I had my colouring book and I'd gone outside the lines with my crayons or whatever it was I was using at the time. So there's that plant pot holder on the left side as well, darkening that to bring it forward. And then the plant pot that's hanging down. But I just leave the plants and bushes clear white for consistency. I suppose if you were colouring this in a full colour scene, you could do the plants green. That would look quite effective. If you were using watercolour or some other kind of brush pen that covers large areas, well, you could do that. And then around the outside of the window ledges, just to give those more of a 3D effect as well. And then the underside of the ledges in the top part. Now this is not something that is in the foreground, but it also adds depth by making the insert of the door where the door is recessed, make that darker, and that just pushes that door back. It makes a shadow line for the doorway. Now even though I wasn't keen on the way I'd drawn this, I still decided to try and make it look like the wooden plank that's under the guttering, so I did do the darker grey line underneath. And then we'll do the guttering as well. So it's just little sweeping motions, keeping the pen and ink moving, and that's how you get the nice smooth effect. So now I'm going to go around all of the windows. Again, this just adds to the contrast, and it, as I was saying earlier, the dark grey against the yellow really makes the yellow pop. And I'm not sure why it took me so long to work out that you could just do all the yellows in the windows and turn all the lights on instead of having them all turned off. I really like that effect, especially because the rest of the image is black and white. It's such an unusual combination. But I feel like yellow is my signature colour for the channel, so it fits quite well. So just a few more of the objects that are behind the bushes. And they are white in real life, but I made them dark grey just to add to the contrast levels, not so much trying to replicate reality exactly as it is, and the table as well. So I'm just looking again to see if I've missed anything, and I can't see anything else on the building, so it's just now onto the tiles, and I'm going to dot about some of the cold grey 3. And I'm only going over tiles that I've already put a layer of cold grey 1 on, so I'm not adding anything onto the white. I want to keep those there. It's almost like using highlights, and you don't want to remove the highlights that you've already created. And this is totally random, and you don't have to do too many, just a few dotted about is sufficient. The more you dot about, the darker the roof will get, so it just depends how dark you want the roof to be. And because the rest of the scene is quite light, I just want to have enough dark grey up there to roughly match the amount of dark grey that's below. And then the same on the brickwork above, just a few bricks is sufficient. And if you have tried this, do let me know how you get on. I know it might be difficult if you've never done anything like this before, but just be proud of whatever standard of sketch you've done. It might be better than mine, and that's brilliant, I hope it is, but just be proud of it. Own the mistakes, embrace the activity of drawing and sketching because it's so much fun, and then just keep practicing. As I said, you can do the same sketch over and over, or pick a similar scene and have another go, and the more you do it, the better you'll get. It took me about 6 months of relentless drawing before I even figured out this style, so don't give up if it didn't quite go to plan. And if you've made it this far, thanks so much for watching and possibly joining in too. And if you would like to see more sketchy inspiration like this, you can click on this video right here, and I will see you in the next one.